After 5 years living abroad, my husband Sean Johnson brought his wife and child home. Gil and Neil are new here. They will stay with us for a few days. We argued about this. On my birthday, Sean handed me the divorce papers. He said, sign them quickly. Jill needs to be a citizen of this country. Let's divorce her first. I frowned, wanting to know the details. But he pointed at me and called me heartless. A few moments later, I saw Jill's update on social media. Shawnee divorced Neil and his wife for me. We finally have a roof over our heads. I liked the position and signed the divorce papers. So I applied to the company to move back to China. My manager Tom Smith was very surprised when he received my application. He said, Joey, you've been through so much overseas, why do you want to come home now? I lowered my head and smiled bitterly. My parents are back in Samaria, so I thought it would be best if I went back and stayed with them. At that moment, my wife, Sean Johnson, walked into the room. She frowned and asked, who's going home? I ignored him and chatted with Tom for a moment before hanging up. I turned around and saw Sean looking at me. Who do you think is coming back? I said casually, a colleague has applied to move back to Samaria. Sean smiled. I thought you were begging to come back. But this is impossible. You tried so hard to be with me, how could you be willing to leave? He put his arm around my waist. Honey, let's have a baby as soon as Jill gets her citizenship. He always treats me like this. He will be good after he does something bad. It's a shame I don't want to see his good side anymore. I pushed him away and whispered, let's talk about the future when it actually happens. Sean was shocked by what he heard. Then his tone softened. Actually, I'm not used to you not arguing with me this time. I thought you were going to fight me. I couldn't help but find irony in his choice of words. We were originally a couple, but he thought we would fight over a stranger. I chuckled. We fight so often that it irritates me. He started complaining about how I argued with him about Jill Green. He said that I was inconsiderate and that I hurt him every time we fought. Sean used to be like that too, he would withdraw from things when he had the chance. That's why I stayed with him all this time. I moved out of my parents' house and applied to the company to move overseas because Sean wanted to emigrate. She told me that I didn't want to start a family yet, so I told my parents that I didn't want to have any more children, and they put a lot of pressure on me. But in the end, all my sacrifices were nothing compared to one word from Jill. I stood up and looked at Sean calmly. I'm not going to argue with you. He looked at me angrily. That's good. Jill and I are just friends, so don't get jealous for no reason. I took his words into account. If something happens between you, I won't be able to be with you. I've heard this 1,000 times. He nodded in satisfaction. I'm glad you finally realized it. I said, I should have done this a long time ago. I should have known that I couldn't compare the hairs on Jill's head to Sean's heart. After a while, a child's voice was heard from behind the door. Dad, please play with me. Mom is so fierce here. Sean instinctively stood up and screamed. He was about to head for the door when he turned and said to me, I just want to play with Neil for a minute. He's a boy, so Jill, I interrupted him. No need to explain. I trust you. He swallowed. Then he said, very good. You have to trust me. He opened the door and left. Jill's son, Neil Green, started calling Sean Dad the first day he arrived. I expressed my displeasure about this, but Sean just snapped, Jolene, how can you be so insensitive? Neil is just a kid. How sad he lost his father. It always annoyed me when Neil called Sean Dad, but this time it didn't seem to bother me. I put my hand over my heart and smiled. If I decided I didn't love Sean anymore, I wouldn't get hurt again. I heard laughter from outside the room. It included the scene where Neil called Sean Dad and Sean's gentle response. Listening to their conversation, I wondered what I should do. After a while, my phone rang. It was a call from my mother. She asked me if I had eaten the cake and noted it because it was my birthday. Her words reminded me that I still needed to eat. Before hanging up the phone, my mother carefully asked when I would be back. After moving, I rarely returned to Samaria. At first, it was due to job instability. Later, it was because Sean said that flying back and forth was too tiring. As soon as he left the room, Neil threw a toy at me. You naughty girl, what are you doing in my house? Are you going to take my father away from me again? Before I could say anything, Jill apologized. I'm sorry, Jolene. Neil is just a kid, so don't be mad at him. Sean growled, you don't have to apologize. It's not that important. Besides, Neil only treated her like that because he was afraid of her. This is all his fault, he taunted her, dragging Jill and Neil along with him. Don't tell me you hold a grudge against 5-year-old Jolene. I couldn't even speak, it was my fault. Instead of defending myself, I said, keep doing what you're doing. I'm just going to go and get something. I went straight to the fridge and opened it. That's when I noticed the cake I baked was finished. I looked into the living room and saw a piece of cake on the table. Sean noticed my gaze and said casually, is this yours? Neil said it didn't taste good, so he left it there. I'll buy you one if you want. I collected the cake crumbs and threw them in the trash. Then I casually said, no, it's okay. After saying that, I headed straight for the door. I had just taken a few steps when Sean ran up behind me. Xiaolin, where are you going? I looked at him strangely. That was the first time he had left Jill to follow me. Why are you following me? My question stunned him. I used to be so happy to see him follow me. I would forgive him no matter what he did. He looked confused, as if he hadn't expected my reaction to be so cold. I came to ask where you were going because you left without saying anything. Oh, I'm out to eat, I said casually. After a while, Jill and Neil came over. She said, Jolene, Neil just said he wanted pizza. If you don't mind, we can eat together. Consider this my apology to you. I don't want to. Before I could finish, Sean said yes for me. He also told me to turn away. I didn't want to argue with him because I had already decided to leave, so I went to the garage without arguing. As I turned the car around, he climbed into the back seat with Jill and Neil as if it was the most natural thing to do. He only realized the problem after I left. He felt a little awkward. Neil is young and he relies on me a lot, so I saw in the rearview mirror the three of them sitting together and looking very happy. I interrupted impatiently, you'd better stay together. Besides, sitting in the passenger seat is dangerous. My answer surprised Sean. He had told me something similar. I argued with him in the passenger seat and he said impatiently, what are you arguing about? It's not safe to sit in the passenger seat. We spent the rest of the trip driving and listening to the people in the back seat talking about their joy and excitement. I felt like an outsider. When we arrived, Sean, Jill and Neil were walking to the pizzeria. When I parked the car and walked in, I saw only 3 sets of cutlery on the table. Sean glared at me. Just as he was about to ask the waiter for more help, Neil suddenly shouted, I don't want to eat with that annoying girl. Mom said she was going to bring Dad. I don't want to. Jill quickly covered her mouth with her hand and looked at me guiltily. He's just a kid, he doesn't want this. Don't mind him, Jolene. Meanwhile, Sean hugged Neil and comforted him. He looked at me and said it was my fault. I smiled and said to Neil, son, he will always be your father. I will never take him from you. That's why Sean's appearance changed. Without waiting for him to speak, I turned and walked to the table in the corner. I ate pizza alone. I heard the three of them talking and laughing somewhere in the distance, but it didn't affect my mood. I was driving home after dinner when I suddenly got a call from Sean. Jolene, where are you? We're done, so meet me in the parking lot. I couldn't help but think how much he disliked me for speaking to me directly. Why would he think I would go home with them after the way they treated me? I said casually, I'm home. This made him very angry. What do you mean? We went together, how can you not take us? I calmly asked back, didn't you say you wanted to watch a movie? Shut up, Sean. Before leaving the pizzeria, I checked Jill's social media updates. Neil always wanted to go to the movies with his dad, and his dream finally came true. There is a picture of the three of them. One friend commented, congratulations. You're finally here, Jill replied with a confused emoji. Sean was silent for a moment, then said awkwardly, let's go to the movies, the 4 of us. Didn't you say that I've never watched a single movie with you? I chuckled and said firmly, no need, just have fun. Then I hung up the phone, ignoring Sean's reaction. When I got home, I received news from work. My request to return to Samaria was approved, and I need to get everything I need here as soon as possible before I go back. This is the first good news I have received in the last few days. When Sean returned, I was organizing a digital document that needed to be sent. He was still angry with me for calling him. Without saying anything, he grabbed his shirt and headed straight to the bathroom to take a shower. When he came out, I was lying on the bed getting ready for bed. He stood by the bed and looked at me. Even with his eyes closed, the heat in his gaze was palpable. When my phone rang, I started to get angry. Joey, isn't it your birthday today? The company has prepared a gift for you. Tom's voice was very loud in the silence of the night, and his words made Sean's face darken. After hanging up the phone, I left the room and went downstairs. Tom came with my gift. I took it and thanked him. Then I went back upstairs. When I entered the apartment, I saw Sean looking in the refrigerator. I put down my things, looked at them and went back to my room. Suddenly, after a while, Sean followed me and said worriedly, we don't have any ingredients to make a cake at home. Can I interrupted him with a yawn. Everything is fine. I don't need this. I'm still full after dinner. His expression grew more worried. Sorry, I forgot that today is your birthday. I casually replied, it's okay, it's just my birthday, it doesn't matter whether I celebrate it or not. After that I turned off the lights and went to sleep. That night was dreamless and very peaceful. In the following days, Sean came home on time. But I didn't have time for that. I was busy handing in my homework. I thought life would go on as usual until the day I left. But one day, while I was finishing up schoolwork, I came across a name change application.